save and go live.
All right.
Okay.
And we're off. Almost.
Oh my god. Okay. Here's my thing back there.
Thank you.
Oh my god, right. He saved the day. I'm over here freaking out.
No, we're
This
good.
cannot be going on. Like, this cannot be my life right now.
Hakuna Matata.
Oh my god.
All right, so we're going to do a couple seconds of intro music, and then we're going to do our intro. Hey, I'm Mike. Hey, I'm Christina. And then we're going to dive straight into the interview. Brief introduction, and then we'll go into questions. First, what is it? What is the Office of the Secretary of State? And then we'll go from there.
All right. You ready to go live?
Ready? Ready?
Yes.
Yeah,
Anyways,
we're ready.
All
Showtime.
Okay. Does she need to talk into the mic too, or?
Is this fine?
got it up as
Oh.
high it should be.
Okay.
Murphy's Law.
It should be going.
Let me check.
I'll go on to Facebook.
Yeah. That's half the reason that I have this up is to make sure that it works.
But the screen's black.
We're live.
We are.
Yeah, we're live on the interwebs.
It's not a black screen.
Apparently not. I don't know if we have volume, but
Okay, so I will be sharing it on my Facebook.
All right, you guys ready for music?
ready for music.
Sure are.
Hakuna Matata.
Okay, let me say share, come on. Okay. Just through my phone. Just through my phone. What's that for? Oh my god. I'm such a weirdo.
Hello and welcome to Right on 14th. This is Mike Parr.
And I'm Christina Caramo.
And we have a special guest today.
Hi, Mary Treater Lang.
She is going to be running for Michigan's Secretary of State and also our very first interview on Right on 14th. So we're very excited today to have a special episode and a very special guest. So Mary Treater Lang is running for Secretary of State here in Michigan. She's one of the Republican candidates, and she's pretty great. And just for clarity's sake, we are offering the same interview to all candidates. So in an effort to be completely transparent with all of our listeners, and in order to be completely non-biased on the show, because that's really important to us and definitely to the listeners. So let's get to the important part of the show. Mary. Mary is a certified public accountant around here. She has been working in the industry for years, got a lot of experience. She is also on the Board of Regents for Eastern Michigan University and appointed there by Snyder, who everybody knows and loves, of course. She is a cabinet member for the Michigan Women's Foundation and also appointed by Governor Snyder to the Michigan State Parks and Outdoor Recreation Blue Ribbon Panel, which we were just talking about before the show is a very cool opportunity. And has many other endorsements, and it's just all around fantastic person and candidate. So I couldn't be more excited to have her on the show. Let's start off this interview here with what is the Secretary of State, this position you're running for, Mary?
The Secretary of State position is pretty unique in that this state, amongst many other states, has more responsibilities than the norm. It's not only the chief election officer. This individual also serves as the chief motor vehicle officer, is responsible for the Great Seal, is responsible for certifying and authorizing and giving license for dealerships, auto mechanics, responsible for death certificates, birth certificates, responsible, I think I said the Great Seal, but the number of responsibilities, it even is responsible for branding cattle, too.
Seriously.
So
a lot of important things.
A lot of important things, and over $2.5 billion is collected just in the motor vehicle portion per year.
So that's a huge portion of the state of Michigan's revenue, so pretty important task here.
Very important
That's
task.
awesome. So
Yes.
what made you want to run for the Secretary of State?
What made me run for the Secretary of State is knowing that Jocelyn Benson is running again.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Quite honestly, she ran 7 years ago against Ruth Johnson. Ruth beat her by 5 points, and she's back, and her radical agenda is powerful more than ever. She is not only going to be the next Jennifer Granholm, but only worse. And she has the backing of George Soros. We have the voters not politician agenda that's in there, and it'll probably most likely be on the ballot. And that is a Democratic initiative, and that's where they're bringing in communities and interests, and they're going to gerrymander so that it's a Democratic state legislation
All right.
majority as well as the congressionals. So we're in for a lot with her being at that helm, and we as a state and how hard we have worked the last 8 years, we cannot afford to have her at the helm because she won't stop there. She's going on to be, as I said, Jennifer Granholm and maybe even bigger and better. So we stop her now in her tracks as we did 7 years ago, and we'll be in good shape.
Definitely. No, that sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that with the Secretary of State position being Chief Election Officer. So, like, I know Jocelyn Benson wrote a book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and so it's like when we need to protect our voting rights and making sure there aren't illegal votes or dead people voting and things like that. So I think that adds some extra importance to the Secretary of State position. So what would be your top priority if elected?
Top priority is the integrity of the election process. By far the most important thing, and if you see my platform, security is number one. And that revolves around my background. Cybersecurity is a big component. I've had over 15 years in computer security, cybersecurity, and I will bring that to the office. On top of that, it's the clerk's training. It's required by state that every 2 years they go through training. As the next Secretary of State, I will make it mandatory that this training is conducted within 30 days out of the electoral process and that they receive certifications. And these are things that I'm communicating with now. It's not something, these are the ideas and bringing them forefront and forward. And the other key component, too, with this whole electoral process is the poll workers. It is imperative that we have a team of poll workers come every election process. That's been the root of some of our problems in the past. And so I plan on pulling from service organizations as well as businesses to pull that manpower, so to say, so that we have that collaboration and those people available as poll workers the day of elections.
Definitely. That's been a huge thing in past elections of not having enough poll workers and then enough auditors, I know, during the polls, too. So
Yes.
that's very important to the sanctity of the election, really. So I'm glad to hear you say that. What else? What makes you a better candidate than other candidates that are running in this race?
I mean, truthfully, it's the world experience and the ideas that I bring.
Okay.
We spoke earlier before we started this podcast, and I have a diverse background. I bring in not only technology, I bring in leadership skills, I bring in innovation, professional, high-level executive leadership. So that type of thing is what is really necessary and we're starving for. In my blast that I send out to the precinct delegates and many folks that follow along on Facebook, you'll see I've already introduced. Let's bring out the SOS app. Let's broaden and expand the kiosks that have already been trialed and they've been successful. But let's bring them out into the business world. Let's have them available 24/7. With my computer background, the SOS online services that we have, I want to broaden and expand that. Mm-hmm. These are ideas that are innovative. This is my thought process, is the out-of-the-box thought process. And that's what I bring. That's the birth and the wealth that I bring to the office. And, my opponents, whether it's on my side or the other side, as we spoke about Jocelyn earlier, they have ideas, but these are gimmicks and these are things that they are rehashing that we've already tried at the Secretary of State's office. These things that I've just mentioned are real-life solutions. These can be done, and they can be done the moment I step into that office.
I think that's great. And so it sounds like a lot of your opponents are kind of mainstream politicians or have been in the race for a long time, and you're not. You've never been a politician really up until this. So how do you feel about that? Is that going to be an asset coming into this election? Or...
Thanks for asking, Mike.
Yeah.
Really, I think that's a huge it is an asset by far because, truthfully, people are starving to find the non-politicians and not part of this traditional establishment. They don't want the politicians. They want the business-minded folks like myself. They want that type of leadership qualities that haven't been at the helm in the past. The same old is not cutting it. Look at our president, Donald Trump, drained that swamp.
Yeah.
He did it. And you know what? He comes with the business professional background as myself.
Right.
Oh, you spoke about Rick Schneider as we started this podcast. I mean, look what we've accomplished. This is a comeback state. The days when Jennifer Granholm and 10 years ago, they were fleeing our state. Now, we're balancing a budget. We've balanced the budget since day one of him in office. That is the Bean County mentality in the background. I'm a CPA.
Right.
I'm proud to say that because really a certified public accountant brings that business-minded approach to this office that is necessary on top of all my leadership skills and everything else. Out-of-the-box approach.
Especially when there's billions of dollars involved in the Secretary of State position, right? With all these fees that are coming through. So I couldn't agree that is a huge asset to have, to be kind of an outsider and to have the financial background. That's definitely a great thing.
Yeah, that's a good idea with the kiosks, too, because the Secretary of State lines, though they have improved, could be better. So that would be more useful. And then with the hours of operation that they're open, sometimes it doesn't work with a person's work schedule and life schedule. So to have those available, that would be very much of a benefit.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because those kiosks, my intention is to partner up with Michigan-based companies. I'm just a solid Michigan gal, born and raised in the southeast Michigan for the last 32 years. My family's there. 32 years, my entire life, I should say, 32 years married to my husband in that area. But it is important that we partner up with the Michigan-based companies. We have those kiosks available 24/7 that people can, when they get off of work, no matter what time, they can go and do Secretary of State transactions.
That'd be great.
The availability is just phenomenal.
So what I'm hearing is the small business kind of mentality, a little bit of a Republican agenda. That's fantastic. Yeah, definitely.
Keeping the dollars in Michigan, making sure Michigan families are working, that's really, really important.
We worked hard to make this a comeback state. Let's keep the momentum going.
And I think that's been a main complaint of the Secretary of State up until this point is that people that work irregular hours have a tough time getting to the Secretary of State because they do work kind of a 8 to 5 or an 8 to 4 even. I forget the exact hours.
Yeah.
So if we implemented a plan where these kiosks are open on kind of a continuous basis, I feel like that'd be a huge plus for a lot of people on the fringes of society.
And the same goes with the online services, broadening and expanding those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because you're limited with services now. So that's my computer background.
That's good. We like that.
That works as an accountant and cybersecurity.
Yeah.
Protect our votes and make going to the Secretary of State easier.
You got it. Thank you. Come on, you want to go on the campaign trail with me?
Are there any other issues that voters aren't particularly aware about in regards to the job of the Secretary of State that you would like them to know more about?
I think it's important that they know that the responsibilities associated with this, it's a $250 million budget. There's 1,500 employees. This is just not a job for anyone. Voters need to really analyze who is the most qualified candidate. And most importantly, who is the most qualified candidate to go up against Jocelyn Benson to make sure that we do not get her in that office and to have our state go one gigantic leap back to the Jennifer Granholm days. So it's critical that we analyze that and we vote for the individual that is going to get us over the line and that's going to bring the qualities and the out-of-the-box thinking and the business mentality that we need and we're starved for.
Yeah, it seems like she's more in it to make sure more democratic votes happen. Where you want to just actually help our lives be better. So
I want your
important.
lives to be better. I want to be respectful of your time so that you can do more transactions and not have to wait in line. I don't want you to have to wait in line. I like to say when I'm out on the trail, I shouldn't have to see you in the Secretary of State's office but once every 8 years, and that's to get your photo.
That sounds
Really,
great.
that's all I want to see you.
Yeah.
And if we do that, guess what? You will never have to wait in the line.
Fantastic. So I really enjoyed our talk today. This has been great, but where can we hear more about you or get more information on you?
Hey, please follow along on Facebook.
Yep.
Mary Treater Lang for SOS. That's also our webpage.com. Twitter is MTL for SOS.
Okay.
Follow along on the trail. You'll see I'm the hardest working Secretary of State candidate out there. I'm heading out from here, and tomorrow I'm in Kalamazoo and Genesee, and we just go.
We really do see you everywhere.
And every event I go to, I do see you there.
So we'll definitely be posting the information up on Right on 14th Facebook page to kind of share and get the word out. But thank you for your time today.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
thank
Thank
you
you so
very much.
much.
I appreciate this time.
Definitely.
And good luck. And we're all following along.
Absolutely.
We're going to liking and following. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So, again, thank you so much, Mary Trader Lang, for coming to be on our program. And please tap into her social media networks to find out more information. So I do want to say at this time, thank you to the 14th Congressional District who sponsors this program here. So you can like us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And as a reminder, any other candidates, please send us an email at righton14th@gmail.com if you would like to be on the program. We would love to have you, no matter what position you're running for. Please send us an email, and we'd love to have you. So moving right along, we have a couple of really interesting things to talk about today. We're going to talk about a few local bills, especially dealing with potholes, right? We're kind of tired of dealing with that. I know several people I know of at least have had their cars go out on them. We also want to talk about the Supreme Court case dealing with unions, labor unions, and we want to talk about propaganda, not from the perspective of us complaining about how liberals lie on us. Like that, we complain about that a lot, which is true. The media is very dishonest when it comes to portraying conservative, but we want to talk about how propaganda impacts people, how it actually is done, and what is the impact, and if point to some interesting things. So in regards to local bills, House Bill 4053 to establish English, as the official language for the state of Michigan. It passed 62-46. It was introduced by Republican Tom Derritt from District 71. It is now in the Senate Committee on Judiciary. So English will be the principal language used for all of the following: public record, a meeting, official functions, etc. So I do think that is quite important to kind of protect, I guess, Michigan's maybe some concerns or maybe certain things that may happen. You don't want them in other languages. And I'm not saying they should be. Mike is giving me that look like,
I am. I think this is one of those bills that's ridiculous, right? Is English under threat in America? And even if it is that really a problem? I mean, America was founded on the whole idea, right, of we need to get out from under tyranny. That's why the original people that landed on this continent, aside from the Native Americans, of course, was that they were fleeing the Church of England. And they were fleeing the Church of England because they were oppressive, because the Church of England said you can only do things this way. And I feel like this is literally anti-American to be like, hey, you can be in America, but you gotta be exactly like us. No, that's the opposite of what an American is.
well, I don't think that's what they're trying to say.
You don't think so?
No.
What is this made then?
Well, no.
Because is English under threat?
No, it's not under threat, but just saying that I don't think that it's necessarily trying to suggest that English is under threat. I mean, we're an English-speaking country, but just saying all official documents need to be in English, I don't think that is like.
Well, should
like
we make an official religion of the United States?
Oh, Mike, that is such a stretch.
All right. I
such
strawmanned you. I'm sorry.
That is such a stretch.
It
Oh
is.
my God.
I'm sorry. But okay, so that was definitely a straw man. I'm sorry for that. But really, there's no point in making English the official language.
I
It's
don't
not
see it.
like Spanish or German or French or Arabic or anything is taken over in the States. And even if it was, whatever.
Okay, I don't know about that, but all right.
Yeah?
I mean, yeah, I don't see anything. What is the harm in doing it just to make sure all official documents are in English? I mean, I don't know about you. I speak a little Japanese. That's about it.
Hanasemasu ka?
Okay. I said it kind of fast.
Boku no wa.
No, maybe Mike speaks better. But I said a little.
Like
Hence,
this.
operative word, a little.
Anyway,
moving right
so there's
along.
another state bill that's in the House, State Bill 4321. I promise I didn't just make that up, 4321. And this is actually to authorize an extra $175 million for road repairs in the states. And this passed, unsurprisingly, 190 to 0. But once you actually get into reading the bill, I was kind of surprised about this because check it out. The bill itself says to appropriate $175 million out of the state general fund for road repairs, appropriating $15 million for, quote, next generation technologies,
yeah.
hybrid fuel stations, and enhanced transportation. Do you know what that means?
No,
I don't.
Okay, Mike, I guess I do not feel so bad because when I
Yeah.
was reading over this, and I'm just like,
What does that mean?
I'm a little confused.
Whose pet
And
project is that?
I'm feeling a little simple here because as you go through the rest of it, some of it is kind of like, like one point in here it talks about not more than 15 million maybe used for projects related to next generation technologies, as you said, hydrogen fuel stations and service delivery, including demonstration projects related to enhanced transportation services for senior citizens and persons with disabilities. While that may be great, I think it's good to help, but this bill is supposed to be for making sure the roads are fixed.
Well, that's the nice part, right? Is that the vast majority of this bill is like proportionally distributed between the state, the counties, and the local roads. I guess there's already some sort of statute that says this percentage goes to the cities and this percentage goes to the state and this percentage goes to the county roads, which is cool, right? That the vast majority of it goes to that. But why is the government essentially subsidizing hydrogen fuel stations? I don't drive a hydrogen car. Do you?
No, that's my point. Is that I mean, even though it may sound nice, but the reality of it is that that's not a good idea because these funds are appropriated for one specific thing, and they should fix that. If
Yeah.
you want to, it's pork. It's just if you want to fix something else, then do that, but don't take the dollars that are designed to fix our roads. I mean, because I've seen some massive potholes. I'm sure you have as well. Like,
Yeah.
oh my God.
Every day, another one of my friends' wheels, not even just the tires, but the wheels are broken. It's amazing.
Yeah, and it's like their undercarriage of your car, your wheel bearing, your whole suspension system. All your chassis parts, they're all under threat when driving through
Definitely.
Michigan roads.
Maybe that's the thing that we should use, right? Is that our cars are under threat. Because anytime that, America's under threat, people just throw money at it. So maybe
Mike.
that's the language that we should use.
Mike, are you back at the English thing again? Mike is going to be on this. I would never hear the end of this.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's quiet. It's fine. It's fine. It's cool.
All right. So great thing that this bill is working its way through the House. It's up to the Senate now. And of course, who proposed it? It was Laura Cox, a Republican from the 19th District, which is just over in Livonia, not far from us. And she is a graduate from Michigan State. So go green. Thanks, Laura Cox, for proposing this wonderful bill last year that's finally just now getting through Congress.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, like in the spring of 2017. It's funny how long things take to get through.
Yeah, the wheels of government can move so slow.
Yes.
That's why we don't need to expand it.
Yes,
Moving
they
right
do.
along.
All right.
So the next is the Supreme Court case, Janus versus AFSCME. I think I may have said that wrong.
Also known as the AFSCME. That's just such a mouthful. Can we not? Can we just say AFSCME? All right.
I suppose so.
I read a bunch of articles on this week, and I really liked Vox's summarization here, actually. So I'm going to paraphrase Vox's summarization, but this is pretty much what it says. The case before the Supreme Court comes from Mark Janus, a child support specialist from the Illinois Department of Healthcare and Family Services. Janus is not a member of the union, but in Illinois and some 21 other states, workers are required to pay, quote, fair share fees, end quote, even if they decline to join the union because they will still benefit from the union's bargaining activities. And then this is the bit where it gets a little voxy, and those of you who have read Vox know what I mean here. Non-member workers are not required to contribute to the union's political lobbying activities or backing of political candidates. And then it gets back to the objectiveness. So it carries on. Janus, however, argues that because the public sector unions enter into bargaining agreements with the government, all of their activities should be seen as political. Specifically, Janus has been frustrated that the union has pushed for increased benefits at a time when the state of Illinois is facing a budget crisis fueled by the management of the state's pension programs. And because he disagrees with the political activity, he wants to be able to opt out of paying any fees to the union. Anything less, Janus and his argue, is an infringement of his First Amendment rights. So you get the point here, right? Is that this guy doesn't want to be part of the union. he's kind of being forced to contribute monetarily to the union. And some people could say that, yeah, money is definitely one of your First Amendment rights, as seen in People versus Citizens United, also known as Citizens United, a lot of you know. So, I don't know, how do you feel about this,
Well,
Christina?
I mean, of course, I don't think anybody should be compelled to pay to join the labor union. I was watching the man actually talk last night. I can't remember the program he was on, but he said the ACLU was involved in this. The ACLU is involved in this.
Yeah.
And he said that their point was like, well, they used the example of lawyers joining the bar, joining the bar association or what have you.
Right.
But that's something completely different, though. The thing about it is that for the lawyer, I guess that keeps them accountable because the lawyer's job has such high consequence. The union's job is not of consequence to the actions of the job, if that makes sense what I'm saying. That's
Yeah.
more so workers' rights. But I think for a lot of people, myself included, my issue with the unions are you guys are donating money to candidates I don't agree with.
Right.
So don't compel me to pay into an organization and then you don't represent me. My dollars are going for you to protect me. Now, I guess some would argue, just to play devil's advocate, that we're supporting candidates that support workers' rights.
Well, I don't think that's what's happening here. What's happening is apparently there's separate funds for like bargaining rights and for political activism. And so what's happening currently is that people are being forced to send money to the bargaining like money pot,
Right.
but not to the political action money pot. And so that's how they've gotten around it so far. Is you're not actually donating money unwillingly to political candidates that you don't like. You're just donating money to the union. So you're not donating money to Hillary Clinton when you're not a Hillary Clinton supporter, or Bernie Sanders, or whoever you want.
And now, let me ask you this, because
Yeah.
I'm learning a little more. I will say this: is that all unions, or is it just this union?
I think it's all unions, and the reason that I say this is that if this case went in Janice's favor, then it's going to be a reversal of the Abood versus the Detroit Board of Education that the Supreme Court has already ruled on, which says that a Michigan statute authorizing union representation of local government employees permits an agency shop arrangement, whereby every employee represented by a union, even though not a union member, must pay into the union as a condition of employment. And so appellate teachers filed the action in Michigan State courts against the appellate Detroit Board of Education, yada, yada, yada. So in short, no, you don't have to contribute to political candidates, even if you're not part of the union, or even if you are part of the union. They're different funds, apparently.
Yeah, well, it's interesting to see how the case plays out because I think a lot of people aren't really clear on how it actually works. And I've heard a rumor, which I won't say where or any details, but I've heard of situations where the union controls hiring at certain jobs and things of that nature. So even though they say you don't have to join, but you have to join, because it will be in your career's long-term worst interest. Because I know even where I work, I'm like, I don't want to pay into the union, but then if I call HR and say I don't want to pay, what type of ramifications will occur? It's kind of like being strong-armed by the mafia.
Yes, it is. Because you don't really have a choice.
No, they say you do, but you don't, because
Right.
it could affect your career. So
Anyway, so that's what's happening in the Supreme Court right now. A lot of interesting things happening in the House and the Supreme Court, around the nation. Lots of good stuff. Anyways, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the 14th Congressional District for helping us fund this podcast. You can always find their website at 14cd.com. They're a fantastic organization that hold pretty much quarterly meetings, sometimes monthly meetings. They support wonderful local candidates, and especially if you want to be a precinct delegate, that's the place to go.
yeah. So and also make sure that you email us at rideon14th@gmail.com.
We've also got Facebook, Twitter, Instagram.
Yes, and we're wonderful, by the way.
Oh, and Patreon. Don't forget Patreon, because this podcast, couldn't live without its listeners. So we really appreciate you guys and your monetary support. If you want to support us, we really appreciate it. Head over to patreon.com. We're at right on 14th.
Right. So moving right along. So we want to talk about propaganda on the show. So and one of the funny things is that we don't want to take it from the angle of just like liberals are lying on us, which I feel that a lot when you watch the news. Sometimes I can't even stomach it. And it's not even just the news. It's even the entertainment industry. I was talking to somebody and I said, why is it you don't see any conservative entertainers? And then when I say entertainment. Of course, there's some, but I mean, like, who are extremely popular, other than Clint Eastwood. And like, and he has so much staying power. He's such a legend that they're not going to touch Clint Eastwood. But why do you don't see it? That's not by coincidence. You know what I'm saying? That is on purpose. So we want to talk about how propaganda works and how it affects the public, because this is such a problem on a lot of levels. Now, are there some right-leaning news outlets?
Definitely.
Of course. But I think that it's severely overlapping on the other side, to the point that the public can't distinguish between what's propaganda and what's actually the facts that are happening.
But what is propaganda? Because is propaganda just bias? Because if that's the case, then we could be seen as propaganda, right? So,
Well, technically, by definition, we are propaganda.
Okay.
We are, by definition. But let me, it's a little, I think it's more complicated than just the Webster's definition. So it said, propaganda is defined as spreading ideas and information to further a particular cause. So, of course, that's exactly what me and Mike are doing. But the point is to influence people's attitudes, beliefs, and behavior. So, of course, we're trying to get you all to be Republicans like us and vote for our candidates that we support. But this is my opinion. To take it a step further, it's information masked as objective truth. Me and Mike do not pretend to be objective. No, Mike, we're Republican. Of course, when I say objective, I think of myself as objective. That's how I arrived at my conclusions.
I just quoted some Vox here. I feel like we're trying specifically to be objective and to show both sides.
Well, no, I think but to a certain extent, but we're still a right-leaning program.
Oh, definitely.
So that's my point. But so we don't, even though we like to think of ourselves as objective, that's how we arrive at our conclusion, but the viewer knows the perspective that we're coming from. They know that we're Republicans. We're very upfront about that.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
However, if the media or the news information person or the group or whomever is information masked as objective truth, but in reality is dishonestly subjective to further a particular agenda, that's when I feel it's more so propaganda than just spreading my ideas.
Right.
I don't know what you think about that, but
I feel like propaganda, it has a specific intent to mislead the general public. And I feel like that's the difference between us and some of the mainstream media, right? Is that our whole goal here on Right on 14th is to inform the listener and to kind of go over the facts and say and call out the bull when we hear the bull. But there's a lot of legit propaganda, and you can stretch this back as far as media exists, ever since print media existed, right? That propaganda or that opinions only become propaganda when they're specifically intended to mislead the listener or reader to that specific point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was watching this. It was the History Channel. I forget. If I tried to quote where I got it from, I'd be lying. But during colonial America, Hamilton, and I think him and it was the guy he had such an issue with. I think it was Aaron Burr, because even though he died in the duel, it was way more history between them that went well before that. But anyways, how both of them like had media, or like you get pamphlets being published, you know what I'm saying, and everybody trying to get their pamphlet out. So
yeah.
You're right. Propaganda, if you will, has been around for a while, but I think it's worse than what we realize and more entrenched into our media. For example, the source for this statistic is the Washington Post, but in Trump's first 100 days, 80% of the news coverage of him was negative. 80%. That is ridiculous.
But just from playing devil's advocate here,
Okay.
what if what he did, 80% of it was wrong?
Well, you know what? Let me say this.
Then is it biased? Is
well-
it propaganda?
Well, let me say this. 80% of what he did wasn't wrong.
Well, that's your opinion.
Well, you're right. It is my opinion, but a lot of the things they were criticizing him were stupid stuff. Like, for example, with the fish, when he was with the Japanese prime minister, look at him. He's turning the fish. Oh, how many ice cream scoops did he have? You know, little stupid stuff like that. And then even the Russia collusion. How long has this been going on? And there is no evidence that he colluded with Russia. So, I mean, how long does this exist? And a lot of the Democrats that I know are just so convinced that he has colluded with Russia and he's just up to no good and he's Putin's puppet in America, and there's no evidence of the sort. So
is what you're saying here is that people only believe that because it's propaganda?
Well, yeah, because they hear it so much. That will get into how people kind of how it impacts people. Because when you hear something enough, you become kind of, I don't want to say desensitized because that's not the right word, but you just start to believe it because you hear it so often.
Yes.
So just to be clear, is why the distinction is important between just the people looking to inform for a particular cause versus me masking it as unbiased truth that I have no agenda other than just inform you, other than like me and Mike here, we do have an agenda to get you to go and vote for Republicans. Like,
That's true.
That's our agenda for sure, and I'm never going to hide that. So anyway, the distinction is important because when I hear information from a particular organization whose agenda is clear, then I'm in a better position to assess the truthfulness of the information. So since people already understand the perspective that we're coming from, they're going to assess it differently because they know we're Republicans. However, if reason being their particular bias, which we have, everybody has a bias, is very, very clear. However, when a news agency or organization says they have no particular position, okay, and is presenting all the facts, quote unquote, but in reality are lying by omitting key information and telling falsehoods. Like, for example, when you tell me about the CNN thing where the women and women can't carry guns, the teachers, because they wear skirts and all this. And like, for example, I've seen multiple people talk about how news outlets will have a certain gun and be like, look at this gun, it'll be the wrong gun. You know, again, that type of stuff right there is extremely dishonest. You're pretending that you don't even know which weapon you're holding. You are in the news. You should have at least one guy there who's doing your research and make sure that he has the right weapon. Come on now. It's propaganda.
Yeah.
Because they're spreading a falsehood. So either you omit key information or you're just telling a straight up a lie. That's propaganda. And so the listener is being tricked because they're unaware of the motives. Because if I watch the news and I think it's unbiased and just telling me the hard truth, I'm not in a position to assess.
Oh, see, I disagree completely. Nobody watches CNN or Fox and says, oh, CNN and Fox have no motive.
Nobody
watches
Maybe
CNN and Fox and says they have no motive.
As I was saying, their ability to discern is being infringed upon. That is the problem. The viewer doesn't have the ability to discern effectively if they're hearing it from an unbiased source. You know, it's like they trust it. And now, Mike, I do agree that there are, and maybe it's just the circles in which we travel in, that the people we know watch CNN.
You legitimately have people and friends of yours that watch CNN or Fox and think it's like nonpartisan?
I don't know about Fox.
Non-propaganda?
I would say Fox. I mean, I watch Fox. I'm a conservative, so of course, when you think about it, their late night, not late, but their primetime hosts are all conservative. So of course, you know, MSNBC. Come on, we know they're left leaning. I don't think that they're trying to hide it, but the difference between with CNN is they're trying to pretend that they're independent. You look at somebody like Don Lemon. Oh, I'm independent. That's a lie. You're not independent at all. Like, sir, you're not being honest. And so when you present it as objective truth, the listener is like, oh, you're just telling me the truth. You don't have a motive. That's not, no. That's what I think.
Okay.
That's at least what I think.
So we agree then that at least propaganda is a problem, right?
It is a problem when you have 80% of the coverage. I mean, even if we step back and look at it from a Democratic perspective, okay, just step back. I mean, if any Democrat is really, really honest, is the country that much worse off? Actually, we would argue better off. Since Trump's been in office, what horrible things what big boondoggle has he done? I mean, people may say he may have said a rude comment here or there, but that's small potatoes. Other than policy-wise, I don't know. I could go on about
Well, I mean, if we're just arguing propaganda and not like left-right, then the right is just as guilty, right? So yes, 80% of the media is left-leaning, but 20% of the media is right-leaning. And who's to say that the right's propaganda is not just as bad as left's propaganda? That's in my personal opinion, what's the case here is that both sides are so polarized and have specific intent to mislead the public that neither of them are healthy for political discourse in the United States. They're specifically creating divisiveness, and why? Because it is monetarily incentivized in this country.
Well, yeah, no, but the thing about it is, but it's 80% of the media as a whole. See, I mean, I guess the way I look at it, there are certain commentators and outlets who are geared towards conservative, like Breitbart. I mean, pretty much nobody but a conservative is going to read that. But
right.
I'm just saying, or you got like the Daily Cost. They don't pretend to be unbiased. My point is the media itself, our network news, our 247, if you will, in Michigan news,
Yep.
they're supposed to be unbiased. I don't expect Rachel Maddow to come in. I mean, I don't expect that. And she doesn't pretend to be. You know, that's the point of propaganda. You're pretending to be something that you're not.
Right.
That's the issue for me, at least. So why is this a problem? And I think Mike, he did mention as well, is it's very divisive. You know what I'm saying? It kind of
Yes.
polarizes the nation. So I completely agree with him on that.
And we've got listener on Facebook too, Facebook Live, because for all of you that are just listening to the podcast, we also do Facebook Live 7 to 8 every weeknight. We got a Facebook Live listener here saying the same thing, is that most major news organizations have a bias, and it's money. The 24-hour news media is all about the clicks and the time spent on the channel, not about providing facts for political knowledge. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah,
random listener.
you know what? The interesting part about the comment the listener had, which is interesting, because we talked about that last week, about the impact of media, of news consumption. So we want to separate the two. This one is focusing more so on just propaganda than just news consumption as a whole. And then our news media is all about getting it first, getting it now, not getting it truthful. It's about sensationalizing things in order to get people to watch. So but that's true. That's a whole separate issue. It's interesting. It's like analyzing me. That's a separate issue, but it's very, very true.
Yeah.
So why is this a problem? There's a reason countries like North Korea and China and Iran control the media. They do that for a purpose, because it impacts how people behave and how they think. So that's why it's
What do you
done.
mean control the media?
Dictate. Well, I'm talking about other
Oh,
countries.
in their own country.
Right.
Okay.
No, not our media. No,
Okay.
no. Just to
Yeah,
be clear.
yeah.
No, I'm saying it's a reason why those particular countries do it,
Yep.
because who controls the media controls the mind of a nation.
Yes.
You know, so it's also to prevent, and also why this is a problem, because it prevents harmony, as Mike just mentioned, among American citizens, and solutions and we don't find solutions to the problems we face. There a lot of solutions aren't put out there because we fall into our own little pits, if you will, and stay there. So it creates a largely misinformed society.
Yes.
But I also would argue that part of the problem, part of the citizen bears some responsibility in this situation, because our citizens should be intelligent enough to say, wait a minute, I need to.
But what's the average North Korean citizen supposed to do, right? That they only get one source of news. Are they supposed to start a news channel? Because that's not going to happen.
No, okay, let me clarify. No, Mike, what I'm saying is that, no, I'm not saying that North Koreans are to blame. I'm just giving an example of countries who do state media, and I'm just saying this is why they do it.
Oh, yeah.
Let's move on to Americans. I'm saying
Yep.
as American citizens, we bear some responsibility in this, because if we watch this propaganda news, they're going to keep putting it on. But if people quit watching it and start going for more objective news sources, then that will force more of the larger outlets to be more honest. Because
Yes.
again, as you just mentioned, it's about the money.
Yes.
So if people aren't watching, they're going to change their strategy. But as long as they can sensationalize things and get views, it will work. So propaganda can be broken down into 10 stages. So it was really interesting. I found this piece that was published on Stanford University's website by the Ethics of Development in a Global Environment, EDGE. So they had this article published by Johnny Manzaria and Jonathan Bruck. And it was titled "Media's Use of Propaganda to Persuade People's Attitudes, Beliefs, and Behavior." So as we know, this is it's a study of this. So one of the things that's really is important to understand. So propaganda can be broken down to 10 stages. The first is the ideology and purpose of the propaganda campaign. So where did this all tie into us and as conservatives? Liberals outnumber conservatives in the media 5-1. So we can see where the bias comes from. So if liberals outnumber conservatives 5-1, it's very obvious how this happens. So, and also what's really interesting, it's hilarious how I know Donald Trump talks about the New York Times. He gets in, but they had an interesting article about this. But also the New York Post posted an article last year, but it was an opinion or a piece by former NPR CEO Ken Stern, where he said the news media bias is real. This is what his words, I'm quoting verbatim. It said news media bias is real. It reduces the quality of journalism and it fosters distrust among readers and viewers, and it's bad for democracy. So that's interesting that the former CEO of NPR said this, not just me and Mike.
Yeah. I was looking up statistics on NPR last weekend, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I was really surprised to hear that 2 in 10 listeners think that NPR was too liberal, and 1 in 10 listener thought that NPR was too conservative, that they had like 2 out of 10 thought they had a liberal bias, 1 out of 10 thought I had a conservative bias. Now, that was in 2005, so that was long before the era of Trump.
Fair.
But still. Anyways, nice
Yeah.
little sidetrack there.
Well, no, it's an interesting point, and I think too it has to do with that person's personal opinion as well.
Oh, yeah.
they're political because
For sure.
if I watch a news piece and it says something derogatory about conservatives, I'm gonna be like,
Definitely.
they're lying on us, and reverse is true about liberals. But at some point, even though I think there's some fair criticism that can go around on everybody. So, at any rate, conservatives aren't imagining this bias. So this was said by New York Times columnist who said conservatives aren't imagining the bias, and it's evident in many ways, including the personal movement. For instance, I'm all over the place. Sorry, guys. Bill Keller, after years at New York Times columnist taking a largely liberal stance, became the Times executive editor. Studies consistently show that reporters and editors stand to the left of the American center. So more than 30 former journalists now serve in the Obama administration. So this was a piece published in 2015. So just so you guys know, it was published in the New York Times. So that's really, really, really interesting that 30 former journalists served in his administration. So that kind of just gives a point to what we were saying.
I mean,
So
everybody
moving
in
on.
the administration had to do something before the administration. I'm sure if you looked at Trump's administration, you could say like, oh yeah, 30 of them are investment bankers or something, right?
But they don't influence the way people think.
Investment bankers?
But
they have different influence.
Well, yeah, they have different influence, but they're not
Yeah.
influencing the mass scale of public opinion.
All right. I'm picking up what you're
Okay,
putting down.
so anyway, this was written by Timothy Carney for the New York Times in 2015. So a cluster left of center viewpoints in newsrooms leads to a cloistering of reporters unfamiliar with conservative viewpoints. So moving right along, just to summarize it, because some of the stuff I'm reading is verbatim from these people's mouths, but just to summarize some of it, because it's too much to say. The guy, for the former NPR CEO, he went and immersed himself with a bunch of conservatives for a year. Isn't that interesting? So
Yeah.
he immersed himself with conservatives for a year, and he found that what was being said wasn't really the case. He said, "I found an America far different from the one depicted in the press and imagined by presidents. Cling to guns or religion." So it just was kind of a testament to kind of what we've been saying. He just went and spent a lot of time around evangelical Christians, and the gist of all he said was, they're decent folks. This is not what I thought, but I was in my liberal bubble. So the first thing, as I mentioned before, was the ideology and purpose of the propaganda. So we kind of, I guess, at least I think, I don't know what Mike thinks, backed up our case as to why giving statistics. The next step is the context. Sorry, guys. The context in which the propaganda occurs. And then next, you got to identify the propagandist and also the structure of the propaganda organization. So there's several steps to analyzing it, which most people aren't going to take the time to do.
Definitely.
Then you have to identify who their target audience is, the media utilization techniques. It's a lot. It's definitely a lot. And also it's it's all types of techniques. Also audience reaction to the various techniques and counter propaganda, which we do see, I guess folks like me and yourself, kind of what inspired us to do this was because we felt like the media narrative was dishonest about us. So we are running short on time, and there's lots more to say about this. But kind of in short, they're the same people who came up with those 10 steps.
Yeah.
They wrote a book, Jowett and O'Donnell, but that's the people who wrote it. It's called Propaganda and Persuasion.
Okay.
So it kind of goes over how propaganda impacts us in the different theories of how we interpret it. So one interesting theory was called the dependence theory. So the dependence theory accounts for the effects of media and which can turn and it affects society. So basically, to kind of summarize it, is that we have become so dependent on the media. That's why we're so trusting, and our level of dependency, I guess, makes us not as critical of them. And also, we can kind of see it in effects of like the whole gun issue. You know what I'm saying? Like how a lot of people are completely paranoid about the gun issue, how the media has been pushing this whole anti-assault weapons thing, and how you see a lot of people like the NRA is evil. Like I said to somebody, how's the NRA evil for wanting to protect your gun rights? That doesn't.
And how they did nothing in particular for the Florida shooting, but that's all that people hear is.
And so we said all this about propaganda to get to that one point about the NRA. How is the NRA evil? So that's just one example, if you will,
Yeah.
of how the constantly hearing the NRA is evil, even though what do they have to do with the Florida shooting when the sheriff and the deputies and the FBI dropped the ball severely? Let's blame the NRA. That doesn't even make sense cognitively. It's not rational.
So propaganda is bad, and free thinking is good. And come like our Facebook page on Right on 14th.
You must like us. We're awesome.
All right, folks, that's all we got for today. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.
All righty.
Second takes about 10 minutes now to shut everything off.
Oh, so we're going to be on here for 10 minutes?
All right.
Just a
Dance party?
second.
I
For 10
know.
minutes?